Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. We're going to be going over how to kind of get ready for the new year with Workamajig. Let me go ahead and get my screen share going here. So here I've got my system already set up, ready to go. Got a notes right here for us to kind of review as we go through today's discussion. So feel free to kind of like raise your hand, ask questions along the way. I'll try to take a break every now and then to review what questions are out there and see if there's things we can kind of run through as well. Or feel free to hold on to your questions until the end, because who knows, maybe I might answer it just along the way. All right. Well, hopefully everybody's ready, got their coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is, and we're ready to go. So let's get into this. So when we're getting ready for the new year with using Workamajig, it's always good to just kind of review the system, make sure that, things are up to date, processes are current, and that you're getting obviously the most out of the system. I always like to just kind of just go line by line through here. So what we're going to look at first here is kind of our system setup area, which I already happen to have open on my other tab here. Now, if you don't know how to get the system set up, plus some of you may not even have access to this, by the way, but this is good information to see, review with your team afterward as well. So to get into your system setup, simply click on your main menu in the upper left corner. If you have the admin manager dot, click on that. Down below would be another dot for system setup. So now I'm an administrator, so I see all of the options. And in this case, when we're kind of trying to review and prep for the new year, what are some of the things that we want to focus on? Well, do we have the correct logos? Are the logos changing on the, over the new year? Okay, well, we might want to go to your visual appearance here, for example, and, do we need to update our logos? So it's kind of a good thing to double check. It's always good to just review other settings in here as well. Are we in the right time zone? By the way, you can also rename the application name. A lot of clients, I don't think, know this, but you can actually put your own company name up here if you want. So it doesn't say Workamajig in the upper left. You can actually have it say kind of whatever you want, but be friendly, because everybody on your system will see that name up there. But that just kind of allows you to kind of customize this and also, kind of update it and refresh it for the new year, which is always kind of good to see. Moving down some of the other options, you got your account setup. Obviously, do we have our correct addresses in here? Are there any typos? Again, always good to just kind of double check and review all of the settings in here. Another thing that comes up, especially over the new year, is how many users you have active on your account. So it's always good to review the activation status screen. So here you can see your current users. This tells you this is how many active users you have on your account currently. Now, this always brings up an interesting question, because, well, where are they? Well, active users are full users in the system, and they could be an employee in the system, but they can also be a contact. So sometimes I hear this every now and then, hey, I can't find this employee in the system, but I see the name here in the active user list. Well, go search through your contacts, because you can make contacts a full paid user that have all the same rights and access as a employee does, but they're just happen to be in the contact records section for other workflow purposes. So that's always good to just double check, hey, what's our current activation status here? And do I need to review that list? Going down under the system options. So now this is going to be a big one. So transaction preferences. So this is definitely a good area to just review, because this really controls, how does the system operate behind the scenes? So this screen has a lot of options. It's very powerful. And I'm going to click on the show advanced options. But right before I do that, just notice these are some of the high level options that we do have, just high level workflow. Project numbering, that's always kind of comes up every now and then. Hey, we want the number system to do this. And so you can always kind of drop that down, see the list of the options that we have. If you are new to Workamajig, the default is prefix, client ID, next global number. Prefix typically meaning the 2-digit for the year. So if you create a project now, so if that's your default, and you create a project now for next year, it's going to have the prefix of 24, where maybe you want it to have the prefix of 25. So if that's the case, let me check that option. So you can see there's an option when you have that one selected. there's an option for add 2-digit year. If this is unchecked, you could just put in 25 now, and all projects you start creating now will start with 25 as the prefix. But the next global number doesn't reset when you do that. So there are some interesting ways how this can work, but I wouldn't say change this just willy-nilly. Definitely review, well, what do we want the global numbers to be, or I'm sorry, the project numbering to be, and why, and what option may work best. We actually have a help guide that actually details out every single one of these and how they work in a standalone guide. So if you need to open that up, you can simply just go to a new tab, go to support.workamajig.com, and I could even look in that. Let's say project number. There we go. Project and campaign numbering methods. Look at that. First up. So this guide goes through all those details. Hey, here's all the options. How does that work? So always a good thing to kind of just, again, review, see if that's something that might benefit you in the new year or maybe as a change in process, just in case you're wanting certain specific project numbering. There's also approvals through here as well. So whenever a client invoice is generated, well, who's the default approver? Vendor invoice, who's the default approver? So you can say, I want it to be the person entering the invoice or the person from the project on the header of the invoice. You got several options to kind of go through here, but it's a good time again to kind of review. I hear this occasionally is, hey, all these invoices are going to a person that no longer works here. Okay, well, maybe review these options and see if they're still listed here. Because even though we may make somebody inactive, we don't blank out these options. So you do need to kind of go through there and update accordingly of that. Now I'm going to click the Show Advanced Options. Now this is where we're going to see a slew of options. Again, you can kind of just review, don't make drastic changes, but definitely I would take a look through here and say, does anything stand out? Is there anything that might benefit our current processes or workflows? One area I would definitely say is take a look at the projects area. Do we want to have some kind of requirements? Are we having reports that we're wanting to generate, but we want to make sure certain parts of those reports are populated with relevant data, and let's require that up front so that we're not missing any gaps when we're doing reports later on. So again, that's where you might say, hey, let's require, project type. Technically every project should have a project type anyways. So requiring that really shouldn't be a big deal. But, this helps to kind of solidify your processes as well. Who do you want to be like the default account manager or project manager? Just different options of workflows that you can kind of designate through here. There's also some newer options. So if I scroll down a little bit here, like labor transfer, like we now have an option to just auto recalculate the labor on transfer, which is very nice. So if you're transferring time from one project to another, for example, and let's say the billing rates are different on those projects, well, do you want that time entry to recalculate to that project's billing rate, or do you want to keep the billing rate from the project it was transferred from? I know it's a tongue twister there, but that's like one of the newer options. So, because a lot of people would transfer it and then have to recalculate after. So to save you a step, you could just have that checked, and that way everything recalculates on transfer. So nice little function like that either you may not be aware of, or hey, that could just make my life easier. So lots of good little things like that. Again, just kind of scrolling through the different options, seeing if there's something kind of new here. Some other new options, is like display assigned services only. This is more for an advanced designated a client or user, but this allows you to make it where you designate services in everyone's employee record, and then when you are in a project schedule, and let's say you allocate hours to a service, and you drop down the person field, it's only going to select users that have a matching service in their employee record. So it really kind of, now I don't want to say it pigeonholes you, but it really focuses you in on how you set things up and who should be doing what. So it is a cool option, but it is very stringent, I guess is a better way to say it. There are other options, of course, just to kind of review and double check. what are we trying to get out of the system? Do we want people to be like alerted of when their task starts, for example? So this auto send assignment complete emails is a good one to check. So that way people get notified instantly when their task starts. Now, it doesn't trigger the first task in a schedule, but everything else predecessor-wise does get notified. So there are some neat things like that. Anyway, there's just different options to kind of go through here, but I figure I'd just highlight some of the ones that I think are the newer ones, kind of good ones there. As you kind of just scroll through the different transaction preferences, of course, we have them for every part of the system. So certain other areas you might want to review would be things again like the client invoices. Okay, who's the approvers of invoices? And do we need to enable any other specific options relating around client invoices? There's always different things you can always tweak and set up and do, but this is always kind of a good place to kind of just take a look at, hey, what options do we have? Like, oh, I can have a default email, when I'm sending out email invoices from our Today billing screen. So I don't have to keep typing that in every time. So you can do some neat little things through here to just, again, make your life a little easier and better. But again, if you also need to update these messages, maybe the verbiage in some of these messages are outdated and we need to update them for the new year. So always good to just kind of double check every field that you might see here as you're kind of navigating the system. All right, transaction preferences I know is a big one. So I think I saw a potential chat come in here. Let's just see what I saw. Oh, okay. We just see some familiar people that I know here are in today's webinar. That's awesome. Appreciate you all being here. All right, let me just minimize that. All right, so let me go back to my notes here, just kind of pick up from where we're leaving off. So we got already down here, transaction preferences and approvals and workflows. Let me go back up here real quick. Security, menus, navigation. I kind of skipped over that one. Glad I got my notes here today. So from our transaction preferences, when we're talking about kind of like the visual aspect of the system, you got the logos and all that. But when we're talking about, the visual aspect, we're also talking about things like, our menu. What does the menu look like? What options and what things can people access? So the first level of determining what people can see and do through our menus is controlled by security settings. So it is also good to kind of review your security settings as well, because there are some high level options right off the top here to say, okay, do I want this group of users to be able to see the Today project managers or Today purchasing, Today accounting, Today billing, so on and so forth. So there are some high level options in terms of what you want people to be able to see and access. So a lot of these options here will determine, what maybe menu items appear. But that just simply, limits what is going to be showing under certain menus. But if you want to have the menus organized in a specific way, we can actually create what we call custom menus. So in our custom menus, for example, here's where we can say, all right, if you're in the accounting security group, you're just going to see these top level items. You're not going to see any submenus by default. So if you want to just really streamline what your users see, this is a great way to do that. So for example, let's go to my creative production group. Let's say, okay, if you're in the creative production group, I want you to just simply have quick access to your Today Creative. So let's say Today Creatives, you want to access a list of projects. They always want to go to their timesheets. I don't know why. They want to get to their calendar. Maybe they fill out some expense reports. And that's probably, maybe that's good enough right there. So just by simply giving these top level items, this is what users in that department or better yet, security group would see when they log into Workamajig. Now I'm not logged into that group specifically currently, so it's not going to limit my menu. But you could imagine that when you look at your menu, you just see just those 5 items. But keep in mind, even though they just see those items that you've customized, you do have the show all apps in the bottom right corner that could reset the menu so they can see everything they have access to versus what they're being directed to from the custom menu. So lots of neat ways to set up the custom menu. Now, not to get too far into the weeds here with custom menus, but not only can you create, your own items, you can also create like a folder. So you can have items underneath a folder, meaning when I'm in the menu and I click on Project Manager, that's a folder. So I could have items underneath here. So if you want to create your own, custom menu to your heart's content, you can do that. You do also have the ability of creating what we call a custom URL. So if you happen to have like a corporate website, HR site, something else that users need to fill in, and you want them to just have access to that site quickly from the main menu, you can have a shortcut dot right here. Just simply paste in the menu of where you want to go, and then that way you can kind of create your own link. So for example, I want to have, like, let's say a shortcut to our support page. Let's just throw that URL in there, and we'll just call it Workamajig support. And I can give it an icon. I can kind of change the colors around a little bit. We'll do the little person field, and we'll give it a little green color and save that. So that way it shows up with kind of like a green box around it. And again, they could click on that right from the main menu. So good little tips and tricks. Things, again, just to kind of refresh the system for the new year for your users. It's always good to kind of keep people seeing Workamajig as something exciting and new. So good little tricks for that. Back in security settings, again, this is a good time to just kind of review options that are here. There's a whole slew of options, kind of like transaction preferences. So if there's any options here that you have questions about, I would say search our help guide, because we do have a guide that breaks out what each option here kind of does as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to just email support@workamajig.com. We'll clarify what it does as well, kind of give you some guidance if it's something that would benefit you. But there's also, again, there's also some other options through the security settings, that not just security rights, but also when you have a security group selected, you could determine, well, what are their file system rights? So if you're new to Workamajig, these are like all off by default. So if you want to give certain users, like let's say our creative production, I like to pick on them a lot. Our creative production, I don't want them deleting things. So maybe we'll take away the delete options, but they can add folders, they can add files, and maybe a couple of different things, but I don't need them changing security rights. So, so lots of little different ways you can kind of customize what groups of users can do what in the system. Now, again, this is project file system rights is basically what this is. So it's not just files in general, it's specific to project files. Up here at the top, so this is a good thing for like administrators to kind of review, is these global options. So if you're trying to have specific password requirements that people need to set in the system, they can't use the same password X amount of times. They have to have letters and numbers. You want to make it really hard to have passwords. We let you do that. If I kind of scroll down, there are some other options down here, like, do I want the system to kind of log people out after so many minutes of inactivity? That's a good one. I always recommend setting that one to, maybe like 12 hours, just so that way, if somebody leaves their computer on overnight, it'll log them out. And that helps with getting like updates in the browser as well. Other options, we do have a two-factor authentication you can enable now. We can allow people to kind of reset a password via email. Now, as a security precaution, this is off by default. So you might want to go in there and turn that on for the users of your instance, so they can do that themselves if that is an annoyance that people are always asking you to change passwords. So again, lots of little different options and things that you might find when you just kind of go exploring a little bit. I always just recommend, though, be careful where you click. So keep in mind that when you're in some of our UI menus, if I click on this row, it'll check the box way over here. So just kind of keep in mind that even though you're not clicking on the box, it may check it just from the placement of your mouse in that case. All right, so some security settings. We talked about the custom menu. Let's talk about connections real quick. So connections has all kinds of things down here, but really I like to just kind of focus on the email portion. So if we're not utilizing the incoming and outbound email feature, we're definitely not getting the most out of Workamajig. The whole point of the incoming and outgoing emails is so that you can use project conversations to their fullest. Now, what does that mean? That means that if I create a conversation on a project, or just a conversation in general in Workamajig, and I choose to send it to another employee in the company, well, it's going to go out to that person, and we're going to have what we call a system email address. Now, that system email address should be the same as this incoming email address. So what that means is that you'll want to set up an independent email account for this feature. Whether you utilize an email account on your mail server or you set up something externally, however you do it, but it's a standalone email account. As you can see up here at the top, do not use your personal email here, because that just means all of your personal email will be in Workamajig, and you probably don't want that. So again, we set up a separate email address for this. The workflow is you send out an email. The email has a reply address. It'll show that it came from you. It'll actually have your name as who it's from, but the reply address will actually be the system email. So when they hit reply, it'll go back to this inbox that you've created. Workamajig reads that inbox. It sees this email in here, and it has a kind of a reply code, if you will. You'll see that in the emails, like, do not delete anything below this line. There's actually like a little code in there that Workamajig sees that code and goes, oh, that's a reply to this specific post in the conversation, and it'll post that reply into the conversation. And if there was anyone else a part of that conversation, it'll email them the reply. So that way, everything just kind of gets single streamed right through Workamajig and keeps the conversation going. So definitely a cool feature. If you don't have that enabled, I would suggest working on that for the new year. Always beneficial, always kind of neat to kind of see that kind of play out. Now, there are instances where sometimes email systems don't like it when the name doesn't match the reply address. So you might want to, if I scroll down, there is an SMTP settings where we can send email through your mail server. So that you need to get your IT people kind of involved to help out with that. We do have like other options as well, but this is kind of the surefire one that would make sure emails go out from your system and not ours. So that way, if you're sending emails to your clients, they'll get your clients because it's coming from your email, again, not our server. So some good options to kind of think about if you're not using them. Let's see, let me close out of that. Let's see if I got any more questions at the moment here. Oh, no, no more questions at the moment. Okay, so hopefully we're all enjoying today's webinar so far. Let me move on to my notes section. All right, we kind of talked about system setup, we got transaction preferences. Okay, global lists. Let's move on down the line to here. So let's go back to our system setup. We go back under now our global list. This is a good time to just kind of review kind of like the hierarchy of the company or the organization. Do we have the same departments that we've had before? Do we have more offices or less offices? Do we need to kind of restructure things a little bit, in the system, so that way when we start creating projects, it's seeing relevant data. Because what I see over time is a lot of people don't deactivate things; they just kind of keep adding to the system, and so then these drop downs just start becoming huge. And irrelevant. So I hear that a lot. That why am I seeing this in a drop down? Well, that's because it's still active. So if your departments have changed or offices have changed, definitely clean those up. It's always a good time to do that. Now you don't want to, plus you can't delete a lot of these rows, even though you may see a trash can. As soon as one of these items has been like used in a transaction, it pretty much locks these down. So you can't delete things, and that's for good reason, of course, for kind of making sure we have data integrity. But you could always say, oh, you know what, we don't use this department anymore, so let me just make that inactive. So lots of just little things that you can just kind of go through and check. Like project types, like what's the work we do? These are just like defaults that we have here, but okay, we don't do half of these. Well, good, just make them inactive then. Or do we want to broaden our project types? Are we doing more types of work now? Well, let's start creating, these lists to be relevant to where we are today. So again, always just good to just kind of review and see if we need to update things. A big area to update, of course, or better yet review, is your project templates. Now, this is like a test site, so I got all kinds of just mishmash on here. So, I mean, I know here I am preaching to the choir. I should be cleaning these up myself, but this is definitely a good area to review, because you can kind of go through here and say, all right, are these templates that we use? Let me open up this template. What options do we have on here? We got some spec sheets. Do we have other things? A good thing is, who do we have on the team of this? Because I always hear this a lot that, hey, I need to, streamline who's on the teams of my projects that I create. Well, if you have them on the template, they're going to be added to your new project. So you might need to clean up the teams on your projects themselves. But a big area, of course, of focus on a template is that schedule. So here's a schedule. You know, now's a good time to say, is this what we do? Have we been using Workamajig for a while now and realize, you know what, we don't need this level of detail. Let's just kind of reduce the number of tasks we have. Okay, I still have to, of course, adjust who my assignments are per those tasks, but maybe we don't need all these subtasks anymore. Or maybe our processes have grown and we had a simplified schedule. We had 3 tasks, but now we really need to break it out into more detail. Okay, now's a good time to kind of review that. And that's a good time to talk with the other departments of your company too, and just say, okay, what works for you? What do you need in order to see the information that's there? So templates is definitely a great opportunity to really dive in and review with your team members to see where can we improve our process. So lots of options and discussions to have here at a template level for sure. If there's any questions, of course, I can dive in a little deeper of what some options are here. Definitely some great info. Now we spend a lot of time on project templates in your training, so I won't spend too much time unless anybody has questions there. But let me just kind of scroll through down here. Let me just double check where the other options and things. Yeah. Now, if you're trying to like spruce up the system, we're talking about making it the system look fresh and kind of visual. Timeline segments is an interesting aspect to review. So a timeline segment is kind of a label, if you will, that you can kind of associate with tasks in your schedules. Now, if you notice over here also, these timeline segments also have colors and different descriptions and things like that. Ultimately, you just give it a name, pick a color, and what that allows you to do is to really make the system kind of stand out, because now when you go back to, let's say, your project templates, for example, let's go back into that template we were just looking at. And so let's say we have this task, concept, creative direction. Over here in our settings, we have our timeline segment option. And I can say, okay, this is the concept task. Perfect, let's save that. And what that does is then that will visually, when did I create this template? There we go, a long time ago. Back in 2014, look at that. But notice how that task in the Gantt view is now showing up as that purplish color. So the advantage with that is that's going to show up in Gantt views everywhere. So not only can I now see that visually, but I could search for, show me all the tasks where its timeline segment is concept. So even though you might have like multiple concept tasks, I really only want to focus on this one. And I want to be able to report on concept tasks with this segment, or see it visually in a Gantt, in the traffic calendar. Lots of things that this kind of opens up. But that helps to kind of, again, give the system kind of a fresh look, kind of stand out for what your users are wanting to see. Now, I don't know if I have a great example of it, but let me go to my projects page here real quick. Because in this Gantt view here, this is where you could actually see those timeline segments and their colors populating. So here's like some gold colors, and there's like a pink down here. Now I think that's more the project type color being listed, yeah, because it's the full bar. But if it was, if as soon as you enter one timeline segment task, the project timeline goes away and you just see the individual tasks and their durations here. So that's one neat thing, is that you could see individual tasks in a kind of a project view. So that's what, again, another aspect, another thing to kind of think about and see, hey, is that going to benefit us in just kind of making it more fresh? I just saw a question come in here. Is there a way to change the name of a template? There sure is. Yeah, so let's go back into my system setup here, get back into my templates. So when you're in your template, for example, that master template I have here, so you just have to go to the project settings in the template, and then you can just change the name or the ID. Now the ID has to be unique, so just keep that in mind, but you can freely change the name here. Now keep in mind that this is going to just change the template name. This isn't going to affect projects you've already created from this template. When you create a project and copy from a template, that new project is its own entity. But it may still reference in the log that, oh, hey, this project was created from this template. But yeah, you can always update the names and things like that if you need to. You can also say, if I'm going to create a new template, maybe I don't want to change the one that we already have here. Let's create a new template by copying from the old template. So that's always a good way to say, you know what, this was the 2024 template. Let's create a new one called the 2025 template. But first, let's copy from the 2024 to then formulate and make changes on the new template. And once you create the new template, well, then you make the old template inactive. So again, this is always a great way to just kind of, clean up our lists and things like that. Because again, I have a whole bunch of in or active templates here that are just kind of silly because it's a test site I have here. But for example, if I was to be creating a new project, and I'm selecting a list template to copy from, and I see all these templates that are just silly looking or outdated, yeah, you want to clean this up because you want to keep this list fresh and concise to what you want your users to use. So if you ever hear users saying, system's too complicated or it's not really, guiding me very well, well, good. Then let's do some cleanup. That's going to definitely, pay off dividends down the road. But yeah, timeline segments definitely helps to kind of give some visual pop to the system, kind of helps to break some things up a little bit that, we all may not be necessarily aware of. So that was the last one in that section. All right, let's get into billing. So when we're talking about billing, this is always an interesting one, especially with like service rates. So let's go back into my system setup here, go under my billing options. So I'm just going to open up my services. So in our services, here we have, our base rates. So I always would like to kind of refer to the services here as, okay, if we had some client just like walking off the street and say, hey, they want this project done, great. This is our base rates. This is what we would charge you. So this is an area of the system you might update, on a yearly basis. But there's always a timing that can happen with this, saying, okay, do we want to update, our rates here and just have that affect, all new time entries going forward? Okay, then this is something you'd probably want to update on the first of the year before anyone enters time. So that's one way you could approach this. Or we could even just say, you know what, these rates in here are just something we're going to update, as needed, just to kind of have a kind of like a current view of what, our competitors are like or what our area is like. So you might just have these just be, kind of more bland and generic of what is out there, but we may not rely on these. So instead, what we might do is we might actually create rate sheets. So in a rate sheet, you might say, okay, we're going to create a new rate sheet, and this is going to be, let's say, we'll say this is the 2024 rate sheet. We'll just call it that, 2024. Now, when I create a new rate sheet, it just copies in the rates that are currently in our services. So perfect. Let's just say what we do is when we create a project, we don't use the rate of services, we use the rate of a rate sheet. That way, we don't adjust the rates in our rate sheet. We just leave them as is because that's the 2024 rates. So the idea is saying whenever I create a project in 2024, we apply the 2024 rate sheet. And even if the project goes past into 2025, well, because it started in 2024, we're still giving them the rates of that year. So what that also then means is when we create a new rate sheet, I'm going to say this is going to be the 2025 rate sheet. And so anytime we create a project after 2025, well, then we're going to use this rate sheet. But right now it's currently the same thing. So I can either kind of go line by line and make adjustments of what the rates are going to be for that year, or I can go under the More button, and under here I can apply an adjustment and say, you know what, we're going to increase our rates by, let's say, 10%. So 110%, apply adjustment, and now there's our rates for 2025. So again, we can just say, okay, we're going to switch over, for new projects that we create after the new year, we're going to start using the new rate sheet, but we're going to still honor the 2024 rates for projects created in 2024. So that's a way that you can kind of handle that type of scenario or workflow that you want to guarantee with your clients of locking things in on a yearly basis. Now, again, if the rates change, in the new year, even though the project is still active, okay, you could still use rate sheets and change over the rate sheet on the projects, or you could just say, I'm just pulling from services, and again, on the first of the year, I just come in here and update the rates accordingly. Now, if you're not familiar with updating rates on a project, for example, let me just grab any project we have here. I guess we got all kinds of just testing. Everything's test here. All right, in our project settings, under the billing options, is where you're going to see this is where we get our labor rates from. So per project, I can say, okay, we're just going to pull the rates from the services. And again, if that's where we're getting rates from, if I adjust the services in our system setup, then any new time entry using that service will use the new rate automatically. There's nothing to change here. But like I said, if we're saying we're going to pull from a service rate sheet, and hey, this project was created in 2024, great. That's the rate sheet it's going to use no matter when the project ends. But let's say, we're using the rate sheets, kind of like how I was mentioning to use services, but in the new year, we're going to flip all the projects over to use the 2025 rate sheet. Okay, you could change that as well. And then again, from this point forward, this project will now, its new time entries will be using the rates of the new rate sheet. It's not going to change the time that has already been entered, unless you were to recalculate the labor rates. And that says, oh, now we have a new rate sheet applied. I want that to be retroactive to all of the unbilled time entries. So that could recalculate labor rates as well. So different ways to kind of approach and handle that. And I know that may bring up some questions. So I see a couple of things popping up already. So let me take a quick look in my question and answer here. I'll come back to the project type in a minute. And let's see, can you edit the service name in a rate sheet without it affecting other rate sheets and delete services in the newly created rate sheet that we don't need? Good question. So let me get back into the rate sheet setup here. No, I don't want to save. So if you're in the rate sheet, there is, I'm trying to remember where we can actually do this. So we can kind of relabel this a bit. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if you have what we call rate levels, there is a way to kind of relabel that, but I believe you have to do that to services. It's been a while since I've gone into here. Let me take a look. Show rate levels. Yeah. So if you use rate levels, now I'm not a big fan of rate levels, but this is where you could kind of say, hey, this is a senior admin, this is a junior admin. So you can kind of put some different service descriptions here, and your assigned users would see this description versus the service name. But like I said, that kind of gets a little hairy if you don't need that level of detail in the system. So the short answer would be no, I can't rename these. I can't hide them. The service rate sheet is just simply applying a rate to each service. But like I said, even though I know I can see that here, the rate levels, it's not generally what everybody uses. It has some pros and cons to it. So I'm not the biggest proponent of it. I would recommend creating, individual services that are necessary. Now, when you create a project, you can specify kind of which projects you want to be part of that. And again, that goes back more to your project template of, okay, I'm going to have these specific services, in the estimate, these specific services, assigned in the schedule to start. So that way I'm not going to, bring in other services based on, somebody would have to change it manually to put a new service in there. So hopefully, you don't need anything beyond that, but there are definitely other options that you can kind of speak with your account manager on. All right, to go back real quick, I saw a couple other questions back regarding the timeline segments. So I do want to go back to that for 1 second. So yes, there is a guide for our timeline segments. So back in our support site, you can just simply type in, timeline, and then there is using timeline segments. And this can kind of walk you through it. See, here's a better visual of some screenshots where, if you have tasks with the timeline segment enabled, it'll show the tasks in the schedule, not the whole, project start, project end date. And it's only going to show the tasks where you have timeline segments. So really cool if you get that all kind of set up that way. And then there was an error color. Can you color code project types too? Yes. So again, getting back into that system setup area, let's go back to global list real quick. Project types. So in here, you do have your colors that you can specify per project type. Now, colors get interesting because you can default the color from the client record. You could default the color from project type. I forget which one overrides the other. So you might have a little bit of a war going on there, but that's up to you. Now you can also update some of these, on a mass scale as well. So if you start, kind of going through here and seeing, oh, we like to have the color scheme of projects, based off of a person or I'm not person, by client. You could kind of get into your project views, for example, and say, hey, let's take a look at all of our active projects. And hey, I want to take these projects, update them, and I want to update their color. I'm pretty sure the color is right there. We go. So I could kind of go through here and kind of mass update things. So if I wanted to filter for a specific project type first, select them all, make them all the yellow color, for example, that project type now is. So you want to bring everything kind of current, you can do that. You just have to kind of plot it out a little bit and plan how you want to kind of do that. But yeah, definitely possible. So a lot of options and functionality there. All right, hopefully that helps with those questions. Let me kind of clear out my list here. All right, well, let's get back into, so we're talking about billing. Okay, so we got the services, service rate sheets. Now's a good time to just kind of do, again, cleanup. What expense items do we need to clean up? So, you got your billing options. One below that's purchasing. So you have things like your purchase items, expense report items, you got media items. Again, have these changed, or are these lists getting so long that it's hard for our users to fill in a vendor invoice or fill in an expense report? So definitely review these and say, well, we don't do printing of any kind. Okay, well, we don't need photocopies, color firing, scanning. We don't need some of these items. So again, just make them inactive. You don't need to delete them or change them. Just simply make them inactive, and then they won't show up in drop-down lists anymore when your users are trying to enter records. So always a good time to kind of review this. Maybe we want to start putting in like a standard markup. I don't have the markup column here, but you could expand each row and say, okay, let's start adding some default markup to our items. So again, one less thing our users have to enter when they're coding a vendor invoice in there. All right. A big one with billing, your templates and layouts. So kind of like I was referring to earlier, like maybe your logos are changing, addresses are changing, we're kind of freshening things up. Always a good time to kind of review your templates and layouts. So back in our system setup under our billing options, you got invoice and estimate templates, and you have invoice and estimate layouts. Now, sometimes there's some confusion around the difference here. Well, the layouts by default is not enabled. So if you don't see that, there's an option in transaction preferences to enable that under, I believe it's under the estimate settings. But the difference really is saying, okay, if I'm creating an invoice or an estimate, I want it to be more like option based. So you can go into your templates and say, okay, show task details, but don't break out the expense detail. So you can just kind of check options on and off of what you want to see when you print an estimate or an invoice, for example. But like I said, like let's say, has the image changed? Our logo changed? All right, go to the layout tab, remove and add a new logo. Adjust the size of the logo space on the page. Do we need to adjust any of the fonts that we're using? Are we now going to use additional fonts? Something that we do also is that if you have a true type font, that is not in our list here, you could actually send that to us via email to support@workamajig.com, and we will get that installed on the server. So if you have a custom font that you love that just really does what you need, send that over. We'll get that installed for you. It may take a couple of days because we wait till the server reboots to do an install like that, but that is something that we can do for you as well. So any level of customization, let us know. But again, now is a good time to just kind of review these layouts. Now the estimate templates, invoice templates, really easy. It's just simply choosing options of what you want to see or hide or show. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty detail of how it prints, and you want to do some special formatting and different things, if you're not familiar with the invoice and estimate layouts, it is definitely way more advanced. So be ready for that. But it does give you the ability to then say, hey, I'm going to get into a layout editor here, and I want to be able to just kind of move fields around. Like, oh, I want the logo, in the middle. So you can really kind of place things how you want it, or I want I want our company address, kind of over here a little bit. So you can kind of just move things around and do what you need, um, versus it just being an option on or off kind of thing. So you can do a lot more formatting. You can, use lines and boxes and, more graphical kind of tools here. So there's a lot you can do with this, but again, it becomes a lot more advanced in terms of, what this is going to do. Now, the layouts also have a lot more extended features that I'm not going to go into today, but feel free to follow up with additional training on those tools as well, if you have any questions on that. Let's see if we have any questions come in here. Does this work for invoices too? Yes. So, the templates have their own selectors down here. It's the layout that it's kind of an all-in-one thing because it's, built into you got estimate and invoice tab versus them being separate with the templates. And that, again, that's for good reason, but I don't want to have to explain today here. So like I say, if you have more questions on, hey, we need to spruce up our the way our invoices and estimates print and look, definitely, reach out to us, set up some training to get some training on the templates and layouts. All right, last item today, reporting. So, that's always a good, kind of end of year thing to figure out, okay, what do we need to start, reporting on for next year? So that may just open up a whole plethora of things, but when we're talking about reports, let me just navigate to, let's just say I'm on the Today Creatives. So let's say I need to run some reports. I'm trying to see, other data in the system. We do have three areas, if you will, or three types of reports. The first type of report we have is what we call our report views. And so if you happen to be, just up here in the toolbar, you click on your global search and you go 2 tabs over to views. Well, these are actually reports. So let's say I'm trying to run a report of my projects and I want to see, okay, let me see all of my active projects. Great, here's our active projects currently in the system. So this is actually a report. You can modify it. You can have custom filters and different things and calculations happening here. But the reason why I always like to kind of direct people to the views first is because not only is it a custom report, but you can also interact with the report. So I can actually say, oh, on this project, I don't want to have to open the project and then make edits. I just want to make an edit right here. So I might say, hey, these couple of projects, update the project fields. And like earlier, we were talking about, let's just adjust the color, or do I need to change the account manager? Project status. Lots of different options that you can kind of change through here. There's some mass ways to do other functions. Like I want to close multiple projects at once. Now the close option is a whole another ball of wax, but this allows me to like close multiple projects at once versus having to do it again one by one. So there's always going to be lots of ways to just kind of simplify processes, just depending on what we're trying to do. Oh, additionally, down here, get labor rate from. So talking about those labor rates, if I want to change multiple projects to using like, let's say next year's rates, I could just say, let me select all the active projects, and all of them will now be using the rate sheet 2025. And so I can just kind of update all of the projects to use next year's rate sheet. There's also the option up here to recalculate the labor rates of all the projects I've just changed the rate sheets on. So lots of ways to, again, kind of do this on a mass scale versus having to go project by project. Additionally, if you use custom fields, you could also update project custom fields across multiple projects as well. So that's why, again, why I like the views, because you can do a lot more interaction with them than just reporting. Now, the one con with the views is that it's basically the header level detail. So I can just see projects. I can't see like tasks here. So I'd have to run a different report for tasks. One that's close is assignments. So within tasks, there's assignments. So this is always a good way to kind of say, okay, do we have assignments that are outdated? And this comes up every now and then of we're reviewing our projects and we're just finding, when our creatives are on the Today Creatives page, they're seeing hundreds of tasks here. Well, why are they seeing hundreds of tasks? Maybe we need to kind of take a look and see, okay, what assignments are due but not done, for example. And so I can just sort by this plan complete date, and I can kind of, you might actually see something similar, to be honest, even though this is just my test site. I have some assignments back here from 2015, 2017. Okay, let me go through, let me update these, and let me just set them to complete as of the original plan completion date. And let's just kind of clean this up. Because if these have been sitting out here for this long, our creatives aren't even using the Today Creative task cards. Well, great. Let's bring everything current so everyone feels confident and comfortable with using what they see in front of them. So a good way to do that, to start that up, is, hey, let's complete all of the assignments or old projects. Let's mark them inactive, in project status that's inactive. But if the project is still active, but yet we have old assignments, let's clean those up. And then that way we can kind of clean up our Today Creatives in the process. So just some good ways to utilize these views, not only for, again, reporting, but the interaction that these provide. So when you see the little checkbox on the left-hand side, there's more that you can do here than just see the data. Let's see if that spawned any questions here. You're not seeing the update project fields nor update custom fields. How did you get that from the active projects? So yeah, if you're not seeing that specifically, make sure you're going to the project views. If you're opening up a custom report in the report center, those will not have this option. So it has to be a view specifically. But if you don't see the option up there, do you see a checkbox here, I guess is the question, because you have to click the checkbox and then you should see these options up here. Now, if you don't see the options up there, that might be a security setting that you may not have rights to update certain project data, but you should still be able to see that in some way, hopefully. If you don't see that, just email support with the specifics, and I'll take a look. Oh, I already selected it. Perfect. All right, thank you. So that's just some neat ways. And again, these views are customizable. So you do have the modify option. I can adjust my layout. I can adjust my filters. I can make this work in various ways. And another thing to just kind of improve the quality of life is just to say, you know what, this view, when I open it, it's already a limited amount of data. So why not just run this view when it's opened? I love this option. Now, it's off by default because we don't want you running a report that pulls in, millions of records, because it'll just slow things down. But if it's something like this where, okay, it's only going to pull in a couple hundred records, fine, run that when it's opened, click apply. You'll see a button up here that appears called memorize, click that. And now when I open up that report from now on, it just auto runs. Again, I know it's maybe a big wow, but I love that because it helps to make this report, faster and just gets you to the data you need without clicking more buttons. All right, now that's the views. If I go back into the main menu up here now, under everyone, there is a button here called Report Center. Let's open that up. So, like I said, there's the views from your global search up here. Those are definitely reports that you can work with and interact with, but it's at a certain level of detail. So if you're trying to, uh, you know, get to a way where you can kind of see data a specific way and summarize it in different ways, well, we have our standard reports, but we also have custom reports. Now, before we get to custom reports, it is good to just kind of say, hey, I need to, review some of our projects. It's now getting, end of year. Okay, maybe we need to run some reports like the project budget analysis. Hey, how's all of our projects doing right now? Maybe let's set the transaction date for this year, see what all pulls up and see if there's something that we need to kind of review. What projects are going over budget, what projects are under budget. So you could always kind of formulate this report. You can, again, modify it, group it in different ways, however you want to kind of review metrics of your projects, but definitely always look at what's your budget, versus what is your gross or amount billed, better yet. So kind of compare some of these columns, whether you're going to group it by account manager, project type, client, different ways to kind of go through it. But this is a good time to just kind of evaluate, hey, what's working for us? If this type of project isn't being profitable, well, then let's stop doing that project. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. But but if there's something that we can see and glean from this, now would be the time to do that, as we approach into the new year. Now that's just seeing things at a high level again. Okay, what's our budget versus our gross? But if we want to break it down into more detail, we do have a standard report. I forget where it got put. Let's see, we call it the recap. So we got our project recap analysis. I think this is my custom report version. Yes, it is. Okay, so there is a standard report of this now as well, but this is also a good report to run for your reports or for your projects in a specific year. And so you can say, okay, let me see all the projects where, the last task was within that year or a specific project type. And this is just kind of a good report to run to where you can kind of see, hey, how did our project schedules do? So I want to get a little bit more detailed and maybe start running this report and seeing, oh, hey, this task is always going over budget or going over the hours, So this one kind of highlights a little better and going, oh, hey, we're under, so we're in the green, So some different ways to kind of like view your projects, just by simply running this report can kind of give you, again, more information of, what was under and over, not just, at a higher level, but at a more detailed task level. So definitely a cool report. It does have some requirements to make it work best. So that is something to think about. But yeah, that one should be a standard report. It just may not be on my release test site here. Other reports to kind of run just for year end, of course, like make sure your AP aging, AR aging, make sure everything's kind of in balance accounting wise. I don't want to turn this into an accounting call, but there are definitely reports to kind of run at those levels as well. Is there anything else we need to kind of see? You do have like also your financial reports. So not only are we looking at it, your PMs will be looking at the project budget analysis. That's kind of their take or view on it. But more like owners might look at the financial reports and look at the corporate profit and loss or project profit and loss. Let me go down here a little bit. So like the project profit and loss multi is basically the project budget analysis, but for your finance team. So that way they can see, okay, not just what's the difference between gross and budget, but what's the net profit. So this report is definitely a good one to review and kind of keep tabs on that. Are there other things that are kind of going in here? Like it's good to review your overhead allocation details. Hey, are we, putting in vendor invoices but not billing them to a client? Are there things in the overhead that should not be in there? That's always a good one to review. I would honestly say probably on a monthly basis. But if you haven't used that one before, I would definitely review that report too. Lastly, when you start getting into reports, obviously we get into like custom reports. And so if we're trying to do specific things and I want to run a report of, some time that was put in and I want to group it a specific way, I could just put in like, time detail by year. Let's take a quick look and see how that one's broken up. So this is where it can just kind of summarize information. So even though I'm looking at time entries, which is something that every person does, let me group some. There we go. So I can just see, okay, for that year, here's how many actual hours were in there versus allocated versus budget. So I can just kind of group things all into different categories if I'm just trying to see something specific. But this goes down a whole nother path of I want to see this and that. And so that's why it's called custom reports, because we allow you to, set it up how you want to do it. But with custom reports, there's a lot of functionality that is possible. But again, kind of comes down to what you want to see, and I always just blanket suggest, hey, reach out to us, set up a meeting if you want to learn how to do custom reports on your own. We're happy to help out with some aspects, but if you really want to get into the reporting side, let us know. We'll teach you. Lots of cool things that can be done here. All right, let me just double check my notes. Yep, talk about the reporting, and that's all of our items for today. Let me go to our Q&A panel, see what's come up. Yeah, if you're not seeing that report, Debbie, it sounds like you found it. Okay, so disregard, perfect. I will remove that from the list there. Let's see, the next question. It looks like the standards on, the project recap can't be ran on screen, only downloaded. Oh, gotcha. So yeah, when we turn that into a standard report, it kind of became a little bit different. Project schedule. Yeah, again, I apologize because this is like a test site, so I don't know if we've installed it on here, but we do have that as a custom report. If you really like this report, the project recap analysis, and you're not either finding it or you want to kind of tailor it a little bit more. I know I personally like this version, my custom report version better because I can just run it on the screen, where you are correct. If you see this report, you'll see the filters, but it just gives you the option to print it to PDF. And it looks like something like that, I think, which is okay. But I like this one. So there are a series of custom reports if you're wanting to kind of see some of the standard questions we've gotten over the years. I'm going to go into our support site here, and we'll say import custom reports. So if you go to our import custom reports guide, and then at the very bottom, there's pre-made custom reports. And so down here, for example, that is where you should see like project recap analysis. So you just simply would download, this report. There were some other reports that I think were mentioned. The 5-week utilization. I don't remember what. I apologize, attendee. I'm not sure what report you're seeing. You might have seen a report in my list, and those are just custom reports. So I'm not sure what you were looking for, but there are other reports that you could try down here. Now, if you do download one of these, basically what you would do is you would just download the file. Don't open or edit the file in any way. And then in your system, simply go into your main menu, go to Admin Manager, and there's this import data. And in the type of import, type in view. And then just drag and drop the file or select the file to import, display the file. You'll see a whole bunch of columns and just simply hit import. And then that would add that report to your system. Now, having said that, I believe all of these would show up under your custom reports other, but it is possible that these might show up in your views as well. So again, if you're looking for something specific, I always just say, just reach out to us. Hey, I want to, get a report that does this. Let us know what you're looking for. But I would also encourage you to say, hey, look at our standard reports first. Is there a standard report for what I'm looking for? Because trying to rebuild a standard report is not fun and probably not possible. The reason why they're called standard reports is because it's very customized in terms of the information it pulls together. Where our custom reports are, specific to a certain data point in the system. So, it can't necessarily combine certain data together, unfortunately. But we've done plenty of report calls and webinars, so feel free to search our help guide for that as well. But like I said, we're always happy to set up a meeting and kind of train you on how to use reports better and get the most out of it. And if there is something you're looking for specific, yeah, sure, send us kind of the requirements of what you're looking for, and we'll see if we can kind of assist you from there. Let you know it's possible. But I always encourage you to kind of search the standard reports first, to see if you can get what you want, or at least close to, before we start going down the custom report route. All right. Well, that's all I got for you today. Hopefully that was some good info, some good things to think about as you approach the new year here. And again, just let us know if you have any follow-up questions, you wish to meet and kind of discuss anything. Be happy to help you out there. Let's see. Oh, hey, Raylene. No questions, but it's great to go over the list. Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Well, yeah, I'll have a great day, great, holidays, Christmas, whatever you all celebrate, and New Year. And we will see you then. Take care, everybody.